the blood dripping between her fingers onto the rough wooden floor, was the first thing Caleb Dixon noticed when he pushed open the door of the abandoned trapper's cabin high in the Colorado Rockies. And for a moment, he stood frozen in the threshold, his massive frame blocking what little afternoon sunlight managed to penetrate the thick canopy of pines surrounding the structure. The woman sat hunched over her own arm, a needle trembling in her right hand as she attempted to pull thread through torn flesh just below her left shoulder. Her teeth were clenched so hard he could see the muscles working in her jaw, and sweat plastered dark strands of hair to her pale forehead, despite the autumn chill that had settled over the mountains. She had not heard him approach, too focused on her gruesome task, and when she finally sensed his presence and jerked her head up, the needle slipped, and she let out a sharp gasp that she tried immediately to suppress. Their eyes met across the dim interior of the cabin. Hers were blue, the color of mountain ice, and filled with a wild mixture of pain and defiance that made something stir in his chest. He raised both hands slowly, palms out, the universal gesture of peace. His rifle remained slung across his broad back, and he made no move toward the hunting knife at his belt. "Easy now," he said, his voice a low rumble that filled the small space. "I am not here to cause you trouble." She tried to stand, swaying dangerously as blood loss made her legs unsteady. The needle and thread fell from her fingers and she grabbed for something, anything, to keep herself upright. Her hand found the edge of the rough table and she clung to it. "Get out," she managed, but her voice lacked conviction. "This is my shelter." Caleb took a slow step inside, letting the door swing shut behind him. He was a large man, standing well over 6 feet, with shoulders broad enough to fill a doorway and arms thick with muscle earned from years of survival in these unforgiving mountains. His dark hair hung past his collar, and several days of beard shadowed his strong jaw. He had spent the last 3 years trapping and hunting in these peaks, speaking to no one for months at a time, and the sight of another human being this far from civilization was startling enough. The sight of a woman, alone and injured, defied all logic. "That wound needs proper tending," he said, moving slowly toward her as one might approach a spooked animal. "The way you are going at it, you will have infection set in by nightfall." "I can manage," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, her knees buckled. He crossed the remaining distance in 2 long strides and caught her before she hit the floor. She was lighter than he expected, though he could feel lean muscle beneath the worn fabric of her shirt. Up close, he could see the wound more clearly. It was a gash perhaps 4 inches long, deep enough to be serious but not immediately life-threatening if properly cleaned and stitched. What concerned him more was the crude job she had already attempted. The stitches were uneven and loose, and she had not cleaned the wound at all. Dirt and what looked like pine needles were embedded in the torn flesh. "Let me help you to the bed," he said quietly. She tried to push away from him, but her strength was nearly gone. "I said I can manage." "And I say you cannot." He kept his voice gentle but firm. "I have tended more wounds than I can count, including my own. I know what I am doing. You can trust me or you can die of fever in 3 days. Your choice." Something in his tone must have reached her because she stopped fighting. He guided her to the narrow cot against the far wall and eased her down onto it. She sat stiffly, watching his every move with those ice-blue eyes. Now that he had her in better light filtering through the cabin's single window, he could see that she was younger than he had first thought, perhaps 23 or 24. Her face was lean and sun-weathered, with high cheekbones and a straight nose. Beautiful, though she clearly had not given such things any thought recently. "I need to get my pack," he said. "I have supplies. Do not try to run, you would not make it 50 feet. She said nothing, but he saw the acknowledgement in her eyes. He retrieved his pack from outside where he had dropped it upon seeing the smoke from the cabin's chimney. When he returned, she had not moved. He knelt beside the bed and began pulling out items. A bottle of whiskey, carefully wrapped cloth that was reasonably clean, a needle and strong thread, a small tin of salve that an old Ute medicine woman had traded him 2 winters back. "This is going to hurt," he warned, uncorking the whiskey. "Do you want a drink first?" "No." He nodded and poured the alcohol over his hands, then over the needle and thread. She watched the process with a clinical detachment that surprised him. Most people looked away. He moved closer and examined the wound. She had already cut away the sleeve of her shirt, probably with the knife he could see lying on the floor near the table, still stained with her blood. "I need to take out the stitches you already put in," he explained. "Then clean it properly. Then restitch it. I know the process." "Then you know it is going to be unpleasant. Just do it." He used his own knife, cleaned with whiskey, to carefully cut through her attempted stitches. She did not make a sound, though he could see her knuckles turn white as she gripped the edge of the cot. Once the wound was open again, he poured whiskey directly into it. This time she could not suppress a sharp intake of breath, but still, she made no other sound. He pressed clean cloth against the wound, applying pressure, then used another whiskey-soaked cloth to clean away the dirt and debris. "You have done this before," she observed through clenched teeth, "many times. On yourself, often enough." He worked in silence for several minutes, meticulously cleaning the wound until he was satisfied no contamination remained. Then he threaded the needle and began to stitch. His hands were steady despite their size, and his stitches were small and even. She watched his face as he worked, and he kept his expression neutral, focused entirely on the task. He could feel her gaze but did not meet it. "What is your name?" she asked suddenly. He paused for just a moment, then continued stitching. "Caleb Dixon." "I am Zara Kent," he nodded, finishing another stitch. "What are you doing up here, Zara Kent?" She was quiet for so long he thought she would not answer. Finally, she said, "Surviving." He accepted this without comment. When he finished the last stitch, he cleaned the area once more and applied a generous amount of the salve, before wrapping the wound with clean cloth strips. His fingers brushed her skin as he tied off the bandage, and he noticed she shivered slightly despite the warmth from the fire crackling in the stone fireplace. "Done," he said, sitting back. "Keep it clean and dry. Change the bandage every day. The salve will help prevent infection." "Thank you." He began gathering his supplies. "When did you last eat?" She hesitated. "Yesterday morning." He glanced at the cabin's meager supplies. A nearly empty sack of cornmeal, a few strips of dried meat that looked questionable. "I have fresh venison. I will make stew." "You do not need to do that. You need to eat to heal." "I need to eat because I am hungry. Makes sense to cook for 2 instead of 1. She did not argue further, and he set about preparing food. There was a pot hanging from a hook near the fireplace, and while it was not clean, it was serviceable enough after he scrubbed it with snow from outside. He had vegetables from his last stop in a town far below the mountain, and the venison was from a deer he had brought down that morning. As he worked, he felt her watching him. The cabin was small, just one room with the fireplace, the bed, the table with 2 chairs and some shelves on the wall. It had clearly been abandoned for some time before Zara had taken shelter here. He wondered how long she had been here, how she had come to be alone in the mountains with winter approaching, and how she had gotten that wound. But he had told himself when he carried her to the bed that he would not ask, and he meant to keep that promise. Everyone had their reasons, and up here in the wild country, a person's past was their own business. The stew began to bubble and fill the cabin with rich smells. Caleb found 2 battered tin bowls on a shelf and ladled out generous portions. He handed one to Zara along with a spoon, then pulled one of the chairs over to sit near the bed. She took the bowl with her good hand and stared down at the food as if she could not quite believe it was real. "Eat," he said simply. She did, and he watched the way she tried to pace herself, to eat slowly and carefully, but hunger won out and she finished the bowl quickly. He refilled it without comment, and she ate more slowly the second time. Color was already beginning to return to her cheeks. "How long have you been trapping these mountains?" she asked between bites. "3 years, give or take. I move with the seasons." "You go to town often, once or twice a year. Usually Hillsborough, down in New Mexico territory when I head south for winter. Sometimes up to one of the Colorado settlements if I am ranging north." She nodded slowly. "And you live alone out here?" "I do. That must be lonely." He considered this. "Sometimes. Mostly it is peaceful." They finished eating in comfortable silence. Outside, the sun was dropping toward the peaks, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The temperature would plummet once darkness fell. Caleb stood and began checking the cabin's chinking, looking for gaps where cold air might seep through. "There is only one bed," Zara said quietly. He glanced at her. "I will sleep on the floor. I have done it many times." "That is not necessary. The bed is large enough. You need your rest without being disturbed. The floor is fine." She did not argue further, but he caught something in her expression that might have been relief or might have been disappointment. He could not tell which. As full darkness settled over the mountains, Caleb spread his bedroll on the floor near the fireplace and banked the fire so it would burn through the night. Zara lay down on the bed, turning on her good side to face the wall. "Caleb," she said into the darkness. "Yes. Thank you for not asking." He understood what she meant. Everyone has their story. You will tell it if and when you want to. Most men would demand to know. "I am not most men." He heard her soft exhale, almost a laugh. "No, I suppose you are not." Sleep came slowly for Caleb. He was accustomed to sleeping alone in the wilderness, to the sounds of night predators and wind through pines. Having another person nearby, hearing her breathing, feeling the warmth of another body in the small space, all of this was strange and unsettling. He had chosen solitude after the war, after too much death and too much pain. The mountains had offered peace and silence, and the kind of hard work that left him too exhausted to think about what he had lost. But now, lying on the hard floor with Zara Kent sleeping nearby, he felt something he had not experienced in years. A connection, tenuous and fragile, to another human soul. Morning came with frost on the windows and his breath misting in the cold air. The fire had burned down to embers. Caleb rose quietly and rebuilt it, then stepped outside to attend to his needs and check the weather. The sky was clear, but he could smell snow coming, perhaps a day or two away. He would need to make a decision soon about whether to continue on to his winter camp or wait out the storm here. When he came back inside, Zara was sitting up on the bed, looking pale but alert. "How is the arm?" he asked. "Sore, but better than yesterday." He nodded and set about making breakfast. There was coffee in his pack, real coffee, a luxury he allowed himself rarely. He made a pot, and the smell filled the cabin. Zara's eyes widened slightly when he handed her a cup. "I have not had real coffee in months," she said. "Then enjoy it." They ate cornmeal porridge sweetened with a little honey and drank the coffee slowly. Outside, jays called raucously in the pines. Caleb found himself studying Zara in the morning light. She was more than beautiful, he realized. There was a strength in her face, a determination in the set of her jaw. This was a woman who had survived something terrible and kept going. He respected that. "The wound needs to be checked," he said when they finished eating. She nodded and moved to the table where the light was better. He unwrapped the bandage carefully and examined his work. The stitches looked good, no sign of infection, no unusual redness or swelling. He applied more salve and fresh bandaging, his touch as gentle as he could make it. "You have a healer's hands," Zara observed. "I learned from necessity. When you live alone like I do, you either learn to tend yourself or you die." "Where did you learn about the salve?" "From a Ute woman named White Willow. I helped her grandson when he got caught in one of my traps by accident. She gave me the salve recipe in thanks. It has saved me from infection more times than I can count." Zara was quiet for a moment. "You are a good man, Caleb Dixon." The words stirred something in him, something he had thought long dead. He finished tying off the bandage and stepped back. "I do what is needed. That is more than most." He busied himself with cleaning up, uncomfortable with her gratitude and the way it made him feel. He had not come up here to be good or noble. He had come to forget, to lose himself in the wild spaces where the war could not follow. But fate, or chance, or something else had put Zara in his path, and he could not ignore someone in need, no matter how much he might want to remain alone. "A storm is coming," he said, changing the subject. "Probably by tomorrow night. I should move on before it hits, get to my winter camp while I still can." He saw something flicker in her eyes, fear maybe or loneliness. "Of course," she said, "you have your own plans. Or I could stay until after the storm passes, make sure your wound is healing properly. You do not need to do that." "I know I do not need to. I am offering." She met his eyes and he saw her struggling with pride and practicality. Finally, she nodded. "I would appreciate that." Relief flooded through him, surprising in its intensity. He told himself it was just concern for her welfare, that any decent person would do the same. But he knew it was more than that. Already, after less than a day, he did not want to leave her. The storm rolled in that night as predicted, though it came harder and faster than Caleb had anticipated. Wind howled around the cabin, and snow fell in thick curtains that quickly obliterated any view beyond the windows. Caleb spent the day before it hit gathering extra firewood and reinforcing the cabin's weak points. Zara helped as best she could with one arm, and he noticed she was stronger than he had expected, moving with an easy competence that spoke of experience in hard living. "You know your way around wilderness," he observed as they stacked wood inside the cabin. "I grew up in the mountains. Different mountains, but the principles are the same." "Where?" "Montana Territory. My father was a trapper like you." "Was?" Her expression clouded. "He died 5 years ago." "Bear attack." "I am sorry," she shrugged, but he could see the old pain in her eyes. "It is the life we chose. And your mother died when I was young, fever. It was just me and my father after that." Caleb nodded, understanding more now. A girl raised by a trapper father would learn to be tough, to survive, to handle a knife and a gun in weather like this. It explained her competence, her fearlessness. But it did not explain what she was doing alone in Colorado, far from Montana, with a wound she would not discuss. The storm trapped them together for 3 days. The cabin was small enough that they could not avoid each other, and gradually, slowly, they began to talk. Not about anything important at first, just small things. The best places to set trap lines, how to read weather signs. The behavior of different animals. Caleb found himself enjoying the conversation in a way he had not enjoyed anything in years. Zara was smart and observant, with a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard and made him laugh, a sound that felt rusty from disuse. On the second night of the storm, with wind rattling the shutters and snow piling high against the walls, they sat near the fire and Zara told him about Montana, about growing up in the high country with just her father for company. She spoke of learning to shoot when she was barely tall enough to hold a rifle, of running trap lines in winter, of the deep silence of snow-covered forests. Her voice grew soft and wistful, and Caleb found himself watching the firelight play across her face, highlighting the curve of her cheekbone, the determined line of her jaw. "Why did you leave Montana?" he asked before he could stop himself. She was quiet for a long time. He thought she would not answer, and he was about to apologize for asking when she spoke. "I was going to be married. A man from one of the settlements. He seemed kind enough, and I was tired of being alone after my father died. But he was not kind, not once we were alone." Caleb felt anger kindle in his chest, hot and protective. "Did he hurt you?" he tried. I made sure he could not try again. The implications were clear. Caleb thought of the wound on her arm, of finding her alone and desperate in an abandoned cabin. "You were running. I was surviving." "There is a difference. How long ago? 3 weeks maybe. I lost track of time. I traveled mostly at night, stayed off the trails. I knew they would come after me. They, his brothers, his friends. Everyone believed him when he said I was his betrothed, that he had rights. No one wanted to hear that he forced those rights, that he tried to take what I would not give." Caleb stood and paced to the window, looking out at the storm. His hands clenched into fists. He had seen this before, during the war and after. Men who thought strength gave them the right to take whatever they wanted. Women who had no choice but to run or submit. He hated it then, and he hated it now. "Your arm," he said quietly. "One of them caught up to me 4 days ago. We fought. He had a knife. So did I. And he will not be catching up to anyone else." Caleb turned to face her. In the firelight she looked fierce and unbreakable. "You killed him." "I did. Good." The word hung between them, simple and absolute. Zara's eyes widened slightly, and he saw relief wash over her features. She had expected judgment, condemnation. Instead, he had given her validation. "You are not shocked," she said. "I am not. You did what you had to do to survive. No one has the right to judge that. Most people would not see it that way." "I am not most people." She smiled, small and sad. "No, you certainly are not." That night, as they prepared for sleep, Zara spoke again. "Thank you, Caleb, for understanding, for not looking at me differently." He was spreading his bedroll on the floor, and he paused. "The only thing I see differently is how strong you are, how brave. Not many people could do what you did. I had no choice." "There is always a choice. You could have given up. You did not." She was quiet for a moment. "Will you come to the bed tonight? It is foolish for you to sleep on the cold floor when there is room enough for both of us." His heart hammered against his ribs. "Zara, I am not asking for anything except warmth and company. I trust you, Caleb Dixon. I would not have told you my story if I did not." He hesitated, but the offer was given with such simple honesty that to refuse would be to insult her. He left his bedroll where it was and moved to the bed, lying down carefully on top of the blankets, giving her as much space as possible. She turned on her good side, facing him in the dim firelight. "Tell me your story," she said softly. "Fair is fair." So he did. He told her about the war, about fighting for the Union, about watching friends die in battles whose names he tried hard to forget. He told her about coming home to Missouri to find his farm burned, his parents dead from illness that swept through while he was gone. He told her about the emptiness that followed, the way nothing seemed to matter anymore. He told her about coming to the mountains to find some kind of peace, some way to live with the ghosts. "I thought if I came out here, far enough from everything, I could forget," he said. "Or at least learn to live with remembering." Did it work? Some. The mountains do not judge. They do not care about war or loss. They just are. There is comfort in that. But it is lonely. Yes, it is very lonely. Zara reached across the small space between them and took his hand. Her fingers were warm and calloused from hard work. "You do not have to be lonely tonight. They lay there in the darkness, hands joined, listening to the storm rage outside. Caleb could not remember the last time he had felt this kind of peace, this sense of connection. He had thought those feelings were dead, burned out of him by war and loss. But here, in this small cabin with snow piling high outside and Zara Kent breathing softly beside him, he felt something stir that might have been hope. Morning brought clear skies and a world transformed. Snow lay 3 feet deep around the cabin, pristine and glittering in the bright sunlight. Caleb woke to find Zara still sleeping, her hand still in his. He eased away carefully, not wanting to disturb her, and set about stoking the fire and making breakfast. She woke as he was cooking, stretching carefully to avoid jarring her injured arm. "Good morning," she said, and her voice held a warmth that had not been there before. "Morning. How does the arm feel?" "Better. Your salve is working." After breakfast, he changed her bandage and was pleased to see the wound healing cleanly. The stitches were holding and there was no sign of infection. "You will have a scar," he said, "but it should heal well." "I do not mind scars. They remind me I survived." He understood that. His own body bore plenty of scars, each one a story, each one a reminder that he had lived through something that could have killed him. The day passed in comfortable companionship. They cleared snow from around the cabin door, Caleb doing the heavy work while Zara helped where she could. They prepared food together, and Caleb found himself enjoying the simple domesticity of it, something he had not experienced in years. In the afternoon, they sat by the fire and Zara asked him to teach her about the different types of traps he used. He showed her his equipment, explaining the mechanics of each trap, and she listened with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions. "You could make a good living at this," he told her. "You have the skills and the knowledge. A woman trapper would be quite unusual." "You are quite unusual already," she laughed, and the sound filled the cabin with warmth. "I suppose that is true." As evening approached, Caleb realized he needed to make a decision. The storm had passed and the weather would hold for a few days. He could make it to his winter camp if he left tomorrow. But the thought of leaving Zara here alone, of walking away from this unexpected connection, felt wrong in a way he could not quite explain. "I have been thinking," he said as they prepared dinner. "My winter camp is about 2 days north of here. It is a better cabin, larger, with a good root cellar and better protection from the weather. You could come with me. Wait out the winter there. It would be safer than staying here alone." Zara stopped stirring the pot and turned to look at him. "You are inviting me to spend the winter with you. I am offering shelter and safety, nothing more, unless you want more, but there is no pressure, no expectations." She studied his face for a long moment. "Why would you do this? You do not even know me." "I know enough. I know you are strong and capable and alone. I know what it is like to be alone. I would not wish that on anyone, especially not through a mountain winter. People would talk. A man and woman, unmarried, living together. There is no one around for 50 miles to talk. And even if there were, I do not care what people say. Do you?" A smile played at the corners of her mouth. "No, I suppose I do not." "Then come with me. We can help each other survive the winter. Come spring, if you want to go your own way, I will help you get wherever you want to go. But you should not be alone right now. Not with people potentially still looking for you." The practical argument seemed to decide her. "All right, I will come with you." Relief and something warmer flooded through Caleb. "Good. We will leave the day after tomorrow. That will give your arm another day to heal." That night, without discussion, they shared the bed again. This time Caleb lay under the blankets, and when Zara moved closer, seeking warmth, he put his arm around her, careful not to jostle her injury. She settled against his chest with a sigh that spoke of deep contentment, and they fell asleep that way, two solitary souls finding comfort in each other's presence. The journey to Caleb's winter camp took 3 days instead of 2, because Zara could not move as quickly with her injured arm, and because Caleb would not push her. They traveled slowly through the snow-covered mountains, following game trails and frozen streams. Caleb carried both his pack and hers, and he watched Zara carefully for signs of exhaustion or pain. She was tough, never complaining, but he could see when she needed rest, and he called for breaks before she had to ask. They talked as they walked, conversation coming easier now. Zara told him about the books her father had taught her to read from, precious volumes he had carried with him from the East. Shakespeare and Dickens and poetry by writers whose names Caleb barely recognized. She recited lines from memory, her voice carrying through the quiet forest, and he found himself enchanted by the words and by the passion with which she spoke them. In return, he told her about his childhood in Missouri, about working the farm with his father, about the simple pleasures of that life before the war destroyed everything. He had not spoken about these things in years, had tried to bury the memories too painful to examine. But Zara listened with such genuine interest, such compassion, that the words came easily. They spent 2 nights camping in the wilderness, sharing Caleb's large bedroll and sleeping close for warmth. On the 3rd day, they crested a ridge and Caleb pointed down into a valley where a sturdy cabin sat nestled among tall pines near a frozen creek. "There," he said. "Home." Zara studied the cabin and he saw approval in her eyes. "It looks solid. I built it myself 3 years ago. It has everything we need to get through winter." The cabin was indeed solid, built of thick logs with a stone fireplace and chimney, oiled paper windows, and a real door that hung straight on iron hinges. Inside, it was larger than the abandoned trapper's cabin, with a sleeping loft accessible by a ladder, a proper kitchen area with shelves and a work surface, and even a few pieces of furniture Caleb had built during long winter evenings. A rocking chair sat near the fireplace, and there was a real table with 4 chairs, though he had only ever needed one. "This is wonderful," Zara said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "You built all of this. I had time and materials. It gave me something to do." She ran her hand along the smooth surface of the table. "You are skilled. My father was a carpenter before he took up farming. He taught me." They spent the rest of the day settling in. Caleb showed Zara where everything was: the root cellar stocked with vegetables and preserved meat, the wood supply under a lean-to outside, the spring nearby that provided fresh water year-round. She moved through the space with an ease that suggested she felt comfortable here, and that pleased him more than he wanted to admit. That evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Zara brought up the question he had been avoiding. "Where will I sleep?" Caleb gestured to the loft. "Up there. The bed is larger and more comfortable than down here. I will sleep in the rocking chair or on the floor near the fire." "Caleb, we have been sharing a bed for days. Why would that change now?" "Because we are not traveling anymore, because this is different. Because I do not want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable." She stood and crossed to where he sat in the rocking chair. In the firelight, her hair gleamed dark and her eyes were serious. "I have never felt pressured by you. Not once. You have been nothing but respectful and kind. But I do not want to sleep alone up in that loft. I sleep better when you are near. If that is all right with you." His heart was pounding. "It is more than all right." She held out her good hand and he took it, letting her pull him to his feet. They climbed the ladder to the loft together, and in the large bed under warm blankets, they lay facing each other in the darkness. "Caleb," Zara whispered. "Yes, I am glad I found that cabin, glad you found me. So am I." She moved closer, and he wrapped his arms around her, feeling the solid warmth of her body against his. It had been so long since he had held someone like this, so long since he had felt anything beyond the basic need to survive. But with Zara in his arms, he felt alive in a way he had forgotten was possible. The days settled into a rhythm. Caleb checked his trap lines while Zara tended the cabin, and in the evenings they cooked together and talked for hours by the firelight. He taught her how to prepare animal hides, and she taught him the songs her father had sung to her as a child. Slowly, carefully, they built a life together in that mountain valley. Two damaged people finding wholeness in each other's company. Zara's arm healed cleanly over the following weeks. Caleb removed the stitches when the time came, his touch gentle and sure, and they both admired the neat scar that remained, evidence of her survival and his care. With two good arms, Zara became even more helpful, insisting on doing her share of the work. She was skilled with a knife and better with a rifle than Caleb had expected, and before long, she was accompanying him on his shorter trap line runs. One clear December day, they were checking traps together when they found a young deer caught by the leg in one of the snares. The animal was still alive, eyes wide with terror and pain. Zara made a soft sound of distress, and Caleb quickly ended the deer's suffering with a clean shot. As he knelt to free the animal and begin the work of butchering, he felt Zara's hand on his shoulder. "You did not make it suffer," she said quietly. "That was kind. No point in cruelty. The animal gives its life to feed us. The least we can do is make the end quick." She helped him dress the deer, her hands skilled and steady. They worked well together, anticipating each other's needs, moving in the easy synchrony of partners who had learned to trust each other completely. When they hauled the meat back to the cabin, Caleb found himself thinking that this felt like more than just two people surviving together. It felt like building something real, something that could last. That night, as they lay in the darkness of the loft, Zara spoke into the quiet. "Caleb, can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever think about the future, about what happens when winter ends?" His chest tightened. He had been thinking about it constantly, but had not known how to raise the subject. "I think about it all the time." "What do you think?" He was quiet for a long moment, gathering his courage. "I think I do not want you to leave. I think these past weeks have been the happiest I have known in years. I think when I imagine spring coming, the only future I can see is one where you are still here with me." She shifted in the darkness, moving closer. "I feel the same way. I was afraid you would want me to go." "Never." The word came out fierce, almost a growl. He pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair. "Zara, I know we have not known each other long. I know this has all happened quickly, but I cannot imagine going back to being alone. Not now, not after finding you. Then what are we saying? What does this mean?" He pulled back enough to see her face in the dim light from the banked fire below. "It means I love you. It means I want you to stay, not just for the winter but for always. It means if you will have me, I want to build a life with you. A real life." Her eyes glistened with tears. "I love you too. I think I have been falling in love with you since that first day when you helped me without asking questions, without judging. You made me feel safe when I thought I would never feel safe again." He kissed her then, a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened as weeks of restrained longing finally found release. Her good arm came around his neck, and she pressed against him, and he felt years of loneliness and pain begin to melt away in the warmth of her embrace. They made love that night for the first time, slowly and carefully, learning each other's bodies with tenderness and wonder. Caleb was gentle with her, mindful of her recently healed wound, and Zara gave herself to him with a trust that humbled him. Afterward, they lay tangled together, breathless and amazed, and Caleb knew with absolute certainty that he had found what he had been looking for without knowing he was looking. Not just peace or solace, but home. home in another person, in the connection they had forged through shared survival and growing love. As winter deepened, their bond only strengthened. Christmas came and went, marked by a simple celebration that felt more meaningful than any holiday Caleb could remember. He had carved Zara a comb from wood, sanding it smooth and decorating it with a pattern of leaves and vines. She had made him a new shirt from hide she had tanned and softened, stitching it with careful precision. They gave each other these gifts on Christmas morning, and the joy in Zara's face when she saw the comb made Caleb's throat tight with emotion. "It is beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the carved design. "I have never owned anything so fine. You deserve fine things. You deserve everything." She kissed him, deep and sweet, and they spent most of Christmas Day in bed, making love and talking and simply existing in the warm cocoon of their shared happiness. January brought hard storms that kept them cabin-bound for days at a time, but neither minded. They had each other and plenty of supplies, and the storms only gave them more time together. Caleb taught Zara to carve wood, guiding her hands as she learned to shape and smooth. She taught him the poetry she remembered, reciting verses while he listened in fascination. They cooked elaborate meals just for the fun of it, experimented with recipes, laughed when things went wrong. One evening in early February, as they sat by the fire with Zara's head resting on Caleb's shoulder, she said, "I want to marry you." He stilled, surprised not by the sentiment but by her directness. "You do, I do. I know there is no preacher up here, no church, no way to make it legal in the eyes of the law, but I do not care about that. I want to pledge myself to you in whatever way we can. I want you to be my husband and me to be your wife." Caleb's heart swelled until he thought it might burst. "I want that too, more than anything." "Then let us do it. Let us marry ourselves here now. We can speak vows to each other. That is all that matters." So they stood before the fireplace in their mountain cabin, holding hands, and spoke promises to each other. Caleb promised to love and protect Zara for all his days, to stand beside her through whatever came, to honor her strength and cherish her trust. Zara promised to love and support Caleb for as long as she lived, to be his partner and companion, to help him carry his burdens and share his joys. When they had spoken their vows, Caleb produced 2 simple gold bands he had carried with him from his old life, rings that had belonged to his parents. "They would want you to have this," he said, sliding one onto Zara's finger. "They would have loved you." Tears streamed down Zara's face as she took the other ring and placed it on Caleb's finger. "I wish I could have known them. They would have seen in you what I see, courage and strength and a heart big enough to love a broken man back to wholeness. You were never broken, Caleb Dixon. You were healing. You just needed someone to heal with." They sealed their marriage with a kiss, and that night they loved each other with a depth and intensity that spoke of permanent commitment, of 2 souls truly joined. Caleb held his wife in his arms afterward and felt complete in a way he had never imagined possible. March brought the first signs of spring. Snow began to melt, revealing the brown earth beneath. Streams swelled with runoff and ice broke apart with loud cracks that echoed through the valley. Birds returned, filling the air with song, and Zara began to show the first signs of pregnancy. She told him one morning over breakfast, her face a mixture of joy and nervousness. "I am with child. I am certain of it." Caleb stared at her, processing the information. A baby. Their baby. The thought terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. "Are you sure? My courses have not come in 2 months. I am tired all the time and certain foods make me ill. Yes, I am sure." He crossed to her and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "How do you feel about this? Scared?" "Happy, overwhelmed, all of those things at once. Me too." He pressed his forehead against hers. But we will figure it out together. We will be good parents. I know we will. I want this baby, Caleb. I want our child. So do I. More than I knew I could want anything. They spent the rest of the morning talking about the future, making plans. They would need to go to Hillsborough in New Mexico territory before the baby came, to get supplies and have their marriage registered legally. Caleb did not care about the legality for himself, but he wanted his child to be legitimate in the eyes of the law, to have all the rights and protections that came with that. They would need to build a larger cabin with more room. They would need to think about school eventually, about how to raise a child in the wilderness without depriving them of education and opportunity. But these were good problems, problems born of hope and future rather than fear and survival. Caleb found himself smiling more, planning more, thinking beyond just the next day or next week for the first time in years. As spring progressed, they made the journey down from the mountains to Hillsborough. It was Zara's first time seeing the town, and she stared wide-eyed at the buildings and the people, so many people after months of solitude. Caleb kept her close, protective instincts running high. He did not think anyone from Montana would have tracked them this far, but he was taking no chances. They found a church and a preacher willing to marry them properly, and Caleb used some of the money from his winter's furs to buy Zara a real wedding dress, simple but pretty. They stood before God and witnesses this time and spoke their vows again, making their union legal and binding. Afterward, they registered the marriage with the territorial government, and Caleb felt relief wash through him. Zara was his wife in every way that mattered now. They stayed in Hillsborough for a week, buying supplies and equipment. Caleb arranged with a local doctor to come to the valley when the baby's time was near, paying him in advance to ensure he would make the journey. They bought fabric and thread, tools and nails, seeds for a garden, books for teaching a child to read. By the time they headed back up into the mountains, they had 2 pack mules loaded with supplies and hope burning bright in both their hearts. Summer in the mountains was glorious. They worked together to build a new, larger cabin near the old one, and Caleb found himself enjoying the labor in a way he never had before because he was building something for his family. His family. The concept still amazed him. Zara helped as much as her growing belly allowed, and as summer progressed and her pregnancy became obvious, Caleb found himself constantly in awe of her. She was beautiful, radiant, and watching her carry their child filled him with a fierce love and protectiveness he had never known he was capable of feeling. They planted a garden and tended it together. They fished in the streams and hunted for fresh meat. They made love under the stars and talked for hours about what they would name the baby, what kind of life they wanted to build. Zara wanted more children eventually, a house full of them, and Caleb found himself agreeing. He who had thought he would die alone in these mountains now wanted nothing more than to fill them with life and laughter and family. In late September, with autumn painting the aspens gold and the first chill returning to the air, Zara went into labor. Caleb rode hard to bring the doctor from Hillsborough, and by the time they returned, Zara was well into her travail. The next hours were the longest and most terrifying of Caleb's life. He held Zara's hand and wiped her brow and felt utterly helpless in the face of her pain. But she was strong, his Zara, and when the sun rose on a new day, their son came into the world with a lusty cry that echoed through the valley. The doctor placed the baby in Caleb's arms and he stared down at the tiny, perfect face in wonder. His son. His and Zara's son. The baby had Zara's blue eyes and a shock of dark hair, and when he wrapped his impossibly small hand around Caleb's finger, Caleb felt his heart crack open in the best possible way. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "Welcome to the world." They named him Thomas, after Caleb's father, and young Thomas proved to be a healthy, hungry baby who quickly became the center of their universe. Caleb had never imagined himself as a father, but he took to it with surprising ease. He loved the weight of his son in his arms, the smell of his head, the way Thomas would quiet at the sound of his voice. He built a cradle and rocked his son to sleep at night. He helped Zara with feedings and changings and walked the floor during the rare times when Thomas was fussy. Zara bloomed in motherhood, despite the exhaustion and the challenges. She sang to Thomas constantly, the same songs her father had sung to her, and Caleb would pause in his work sometimes just to listen to her voice carrying through the cabin, sweet and pure. They were happy, the three of them, in a way that seemed almost too good to be true. Winter came again, their second together, but this time they were prepared and well supplied. The cabin was warm and solid, the root cellar was full, and they had each other and their son. Thomas grew and thrived, learning to smile and laugh, and every milestone filled Caleb with a joy so intense it sometimes brought tears to his eyes. On Christmas morning, with snow falling softly outside and Thomas sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Zara and Caleb exchanged gifts again. She gave him a drawing she had made of the three of them, rendered in charcoal with surprising skill. He gave her a necklace he had carved from wood and strung on a leather cord, shaped like a heart with their initials intertwined. "I love you," she said, kissing him softly. "Thank you for giving me this life, this family. I love you too. You saved me, Zara, you and Thomas. You gave me reason to live again. We saved each other, and that was the truth of it." Two broken people, alone and hurting, had found each other in the wilderness and built something beautiful from their shared pain and survival. They had created love and family and hope in the most unlikely of places, and that made it all the more precious. As the years passed, their family grew. Zara gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah, and then another son they called Daniel. The cabin grew too, expanding to accommodate their growing brood. Caleb built onto it year after year, adding rooms and space until it was no longer a simple cabin but a real home, sturdy and comfortable and filled with the noise and chaos of children. Thomas grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved to read and learn. Sarah was wild and fearless like her mother, climbing trees and exploring the forest with no fear. Daniel was gentle and artistic, content to spend hours carving wood figures or drawing in the dirt. Caleb and Zara raised them with love and discipline, teaching them to read and write, to hunt and trap and survive, to be kind and brave and honest. They made trips to Hillsborough twice a year, and eventually, as the children grew, they discussed moving closer to town for the sake of schooling. But every time they talked about it seriously, they looked around at their mountain home and knew they could not leave. This was where they had found each other. This was where they had built their life together. This was home. So instead, they hired a tutor to come and stay with them for a few months each year. A young woman from Hillsborough who loved the mountains and was happy for the steady work. The children learned their lessons and thrived, and Caleb and Zara watched them grow with pride and wonder. The years were not without hardship. There were bad winters and lean times. There were illnesses and injuries, the normal trials of life in the wilderness. But they faced everything together, Caleb and Zara, partners in every sense of the word. They had learned early on how to lean on each other's strength, how to support each other through difficult times, and that foundation never wavered. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Caleb and Zara stood together on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the mountains. The children were inside, supposedly going to bed but more likely telling stories and giggling. From inside came the sound of Thomas reading to his younger siblings, his voice clear and steady. "Can you believe it has been 10 years?" Zara asked, leaning against Caleb's solid frame. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. If you could go back, knowing everything that would happen, would you do it again?" He turned to face her, cupping her face in his large hands. "Every time. 1,000 times. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Zara Dixon. You and our children, this life we have built. I would not change a single moment." She rose on her toes to kiss him, deep and sweet. "I love you, Caleb, more now than even when we first married. Is that possible?" "It is. Because I feel the same way." They stood together in the gathering darkness, holding each other, listening to their children's laughter inside. And Caleb thought back to that day 10 years ago when he had found a woman stitching her own wound in an abandoned cabin, and how that moment had changed everything. He had helped her without asking questions, had respected her privacy and her strength, and in return she had given him everything. A reason to live, a family, love beyond measure. The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons and growth. The children grew into teenagers and young adults. Thomas left eventually to study medicine in Denver, inspired by the doctor who had delivered him and the herbs and remedies his mother had taught him. Sarah married a young rancher from Hillsboro and moved to town, though she visited often with her own growing family. Daniel stayed in the mountains, building his own cabin nearby and continuing the trapping tradition, though he also sold his carvings to stores in town and was gaining a reputation as an artist. Caleb and Zara grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces weathering like the mountains around them. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew deeper and richer with time, tempered by years of shared experience and unwavering commitment. They were partners in the truest sense, equal in all things, supporting each other through the challenges of aging and the bittersweet joy of watching their children leave to build their own lives. On a warm summer evening when Caleb was 63 and Zara 61, they sat together on the porch of the home they had built so many years ago. Grandchildren played in the yard, Sarah's children visiting for a few weeks. Inside, Daniel was cooking dinner and filling the house with the smell of fresh bread and roasted meat. Thomas was expected to arrive tomorrow with his wife and young son. The house that had once seemed so empty would soon be full again. "We did well, did we not?" Zara said, taking Caleb's hand. Her hands were more wrinkled now, marked by years of work, but to him they were still beautiful. "We did better than well. We built a legacy. It started with you finding me that day, with you helping me without judging. It started with you being strong enough to survive. Strong enough to trust me." She squeezed his hand. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night? That everyone has their story and I could tell it if and when I wanted to?" "I remember. That changed everything for me. No one had ever given me that kind of respect before. That kind of trust. I fell in love with you in that moment, though I did not realize it yet." Caleb raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I fell in love with you when I saw how brave you were, stitching your own wound, refusing to give up. I knew then you were someone special." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. This was what happiness looked like, Caleb thought. Not grand gestures or dramatic moments, but this. Quiet evenings with the woman he loved, surrounded by the family they had created in the home they had built together. This was everything he had never dared to dream of, and it was more than enough. It was everything. As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast mountain sky, their grandchildren came running up onto the porch, breathless and excited, begging for stories. Caleb and Zara looked at each other and smiled, then gathered the children close. And as they had done so many times before, They began to tell stories. Stories of the old days, of survival and courage, of two people who had found each other in the wilderness and built a life that endured. The children listened with wide eyes, and Caleb held Zara close, grateful beyond words for every moment, every memory, every year they had been given together. The years rolled on, gentle and full. Caleb and Zara celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The family had grown large and sprawling, but they all made the journey to the mountain home for the celebration. They roasted a whole pig and made enough food to feed an army. They sang songs and told stories and danced under the stars. Late in the evening, after most of the family had retired to various cabins and tents scattered around the property, Caleb and Zara sat together by a fire, just the two of them. She leaned against him, fitting into the curve of his body as perfectly as she had 40 years ago. 40 years, she murmured. How did we get so lucky? It was not luck, it was choice. Every day we chose each other, we chose to build this life together. I would choose you again, every time, and I would choose you. They sat by the fire until it burned down to embers, then walked slowly back to their house. Their steps slower now, but their hands still joined as they had been for 4 decades. They climbed into bed, and Caleb pulled Zara close, breathing in the familiar scent of her, feeling the solid warmth of her body against his. "Caleb," she whispered in the darkness. "Yes, my love, thank you for everything, for saving my life that day, for loving me. For this beautiful, impossible life we have built. Thank you for letting me save you, for loving me back, for making me whole again." She turned in his arms to face him, and even in the darkness he could see the love shining in her eyes. They had changed so much over the years, aged and weathered, but when he looked at her, he still saw the fierce, brave woman he had found in that cabin so long ago. And when she looked at him, she still saw the gentle, strong man who had helped her without judgment, who had respected her story and waited patiently for her to tell it. They made love that night, slowly and tenderly, a celebration of years together and a promise of whatever time remained. And afterward, they fell asleep tangled together, as they had slept for 40 years, 2 souls joined into one. Caleb Dixon lived to be 87 years old, and every single day of those years after finding Zara was a gift he never took for granted. When he finally passed, it was peacefully in his sleep, in the bed he had shared with his wife for nearly half a century, in the house they had built together, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and deeply loved. Zara followed him just 6 months later, unable to imagine a world without her partner, her love, her Caleb. The family buried them together on the mountain they had called home, under tall pines with a view of the valley where they had built their life. The headstone was simple, carved by Daniel's skilled hands with words chosen by their children, Caleb Dixon and Zara Dixon. Beloved, together always, and they were together always, in the stories their family told and retold through the generations. In the legacy of love and strength and partnership they had built. In the mountain home that still stood, maintained by their descendants who could not bear to let it fall into ruin. In the way their grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren loved each other, having learned from Caleb and Zara's example what real partnership looked like. The story of how they met became family legend. The mountain man who found a woman stitching her own wound badly and cleaned it properly without asking how she got it. The respect and trust that gesture had represented, the foundation it had laid for everything that came after. It became a touchstone for the family, a reminder that love built on respect and trust could weather any storm, survive any hardship, and grow deeper with time rather than diminishing. Years turned to decades and decades to a century, but the story endured. The cabin endured. And the love between Caleb Dixon and Zara Dixon endured in the hearts and memories of all who came after them. Proof that even in the harshest wilderness, even starting from the darkest places, two people could find each other and build something beautiful that would last long after they were gone. Their great-great-grandson, a writer, eventually penned a book about their story, based on family accounts, and the journals both Caleb and Zara had kept throughout their lives. It became a modest bestseller, touching readers with its portrayal of true partnership, of love that endured through hardship, of two strong people who had made each other stronger still. But for those who had known them, who had been raised in the warmth of their love and guidance, no book could fully capture what Caleb and Zara had meant. They had been living proof that love could heal, that trust could transform, that two broken people could find wholeness in each other. They had shown their family what it meant to truly partner with someone, to respect them completely, to build a life based on equality and mutual support. The mountain home stood for over 150 years before it finally fell into disrepair, too old and weathered to maintain. But before it fell, 5 generations of the family had gathered there every summer, keeping the tradition alive, telling the stories, maintaining the connection. And when the house finally had to be abandoned, they built a new one nearby, designed to echo the original, a place where the family could still gather and remember. The true legacy of Caleb and Zara Dixon was not in buildings or property, or even in the large family they had created. It was in the example they had set. They had shown that strength could be gentle, that trust could be given freely, that respect was the foundation of real love. They had demonstrated that two people from the hardest circumstances could create something beautiful together. They had proven that love, real love, did not fade with time but grew richer and deeper with each passing year. And so their story lived on, passed down through generations, adapted and retold but never forgotten. The mountain man who helped a wounded woman without asking questions. The woman who learned to trust again. The love they built together in the wilderness, strong enough to weather anything, deep enough to last forever. It was a story of survival and healing, of partnership and respect, of love in its truest and most enduring form. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the hardships they had overcome or the challenges they had faced, but the love they had built and maintained through 40 years of marriage and every day of their lives after that first meeting. They had found each other in the most unlikely way, in the most unlikely place, and they had chosen each other every single day after that. That choice, renewed daily, was what had made their love unbreakable. That choice was their legacy, their gift to all who came after. And in the mountains of Colorado, on clear autumn days when the aspens turned gold and the air carried the first hint of winter, people said you could still feel their presence. A sense of peace and love that lingered in the valley where they had made their home. A reminder that true love, built on respect and trust and partnership, could transcend even death. That the bonds forged between two souls who truly saw and valued each other could never fully be broken. Caleb Dixon and Zara Dixon. Two souls who had found each other in the wilderness. Two hearts that had beat as one for 40 years and beyond. Two lives that had intertwined so completely they could never truly be separated. Their story was one of hope and healing, of love conquering fear, of two people who had saved each other and built a legacy that would endure for generations. And in that legacy, in the family they had created and the love they had demonstrated, they truly did live on, together always, just as the headstone promised.